On a warm June morning in 1942, thousands of miles from the American mainland, fighters, bombers, and aircraft carriers converged on a tiny speck of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Within a matter of hours, a battle would unfold that would alter the course of World War II and decide the future balance of power in the Pacific. This is the story of the Battle of Midway. As a combat veteran, I've always found Midway to be one of the finest examples of strategic planning, intelligence gathering, and battlefield decision-making in military history. In the spring of 1942, the Japanese Empire appeared unstoppable. Only 6 months earlier, Japanese aircraft had devastated the American Pacific Fleet during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Since then, Japanese forces had swept across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, capturing territory at a breathtaking pace. Yet despite these victories, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of Japan's combined fleet, remained concerned. He understood something many Japanese leaders did not. America's industrial capacity was enormous. If given enough time, the United States could outbuild, outproduce, and eventually overpower Japan. Yamamoto believed the solution was simple. The United States Navy had to be destroyed before America could fully mobilize its wartime economy. His next target would be Midway Atoll. Located almost exactly between Japan and the United States, Midway possessed strategic importance far beyond its size. By 1942, the Americans had transformed the remote atoll into an important naval and air base. If Japan could capture Midway, it would extend its defensive perimeter deep into the Pacific and potentially threaten Hawaii itself. But Yamamoto had ambitions beyond simply capturing an island. He wanted to lure the remaining American aircraft carriers into a decisive battle and destroy them once and for all. To accomplish this, he developed a complex three-phase operation. The first phase involved a diversionary attack against the Aleutian Islands off Alaska. Yamamoto hoped this move would draw American attention northward. The second phase called for Vice Admiral Nagumo's powerful carrier force to launch devastating airstrikes against Midway itself. Nagumo commanded 4 of Japan's most experienced fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Once Midway's defenses had been neutralized, Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo would arrive with an invasion force carrying approximately 5,000 troops. Finally, when American reinforcements arrived to save the island, Nagumo's carriers and Yamamoto's battleships would destroy them in a massive naval engagement. On paper, the plan seemed brilliant. But there was one problem. The Americans already knew about it. Working inside a windowless basement at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team of cryptanalysts had spent months breaking portions of Japan's naval communication codes. Through painstaking effort, they uncovered vital information regarding Japanese intentions. Even more importantly, they confirmed that the mysterious code designation AF referred to Midway. The trap had been discovered. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, made a bold decision. Rather than avoid the battle, he would set a trap of his own. Nimitz assembled every carrier available. Task Force 17, commanded by Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, centered around the aircraft carrier Yorktown. Task Force 16, led by Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, consisted of the carriers Enterprise and Hornet. Together, they represented America's best chance of stopping Japanese expansion. The stage was set. On June 3, 1942, Japanese forces attacked the Aleutian Islands exactly as Yamamoto had planned. But Nimitz refused to take the bait. Only limited American forces responded. The main American carrier force remained hidden northeast of Midway, waiting. As Japanese forces approached Midway, Yamamoto received reports suggesting American carriers might be operating nearby. However, concerned about maintaining radio silence, he chose not to transmit warnings to Nagumo. That decision would prove disastrous. Meanwhile, American reconnaissance aircraft searched the ocean for signs of the approaching enemy. At 9:25 in the morning, Ensign Jack Reed flying a PBY Catalina patrol aircraft finally spotted Japanese ships through dense fog. The battle was about to begin. American B-17 bombers launched attacks against the Japanese invasion fleet, but failed to score any hits. Although tactically ineffective, these strikes marked the opening engagement of the Battle of Midway. The following morning, June 4, Nagumo launched the first major attack. 108 Japanese aircraft roared toward Midway. Zero fighters, Val dive bombers, and Kate torpedo bombers filled the skies. At 5:56 a.m., air raid sirens echoed across Midway. American fighters scrambled to meet the incoming threat. The defenders fought bravely but were heavily outnumbered. Japanese bombs smashed into runways, hangars, fuel facilities, and military installations. For 27 terrifying minutes, destruction rained down upon the island. Yet Midway survived. At 7:05 a.m., one of Nagumo's returning pilots reported that Midway had not been completely neutralized and would require another strike. Nagumo now faced a crucial decision. Should he prepare a second attack against Midway? Or should he keep his reserve aircraft armed for a possible naval battle against American carriers? Before he could decide, American aircraft began attacking his fleet. Bombers and torpedo planes from Midway had somehow located the Japanese carriers. Nagumo was stunned. How could the Americans know his exact position? As attack after attack disrupted his operations, Nagumo finally ordered his reserve aircraft to be rearmed with bombs for another strike on Midway. Then everything changed. A Japanese scout plane reported enemy ships east of Midway. Soon afterward, confirmation arrived. An American aircraft carrier had been spotted. Nagumo immediately reversed his orders. Now the reserve aircraft had to be rearmed once again, this time with torpedoes for a naval attack. Fuel hoses, bombs, torpedoes, and ammunition littered the carrier decks and hangars. The Japanese carriers were becoming increasingly vulnerable. Meanwhile, American torpedo squadrons arrived. Flying obsolete and painfully slow Devastator torpedo bombers, they launched desperate attacks. One after another, they were slaughtered. Japanese Zero fighters tore through their formations. Of the dozens of torpedo bombers committed to the attack, only a handful survived. To many observers, it looked as though the Americans were losing badly. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The torpedo bombers had dragged Japanese fighters down to sea level and scattered their defensive formations. Then, at the most critical moment of the battle, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey arrived. Earlier that morning, McCluskey and his dive bombers from Enterprise had flown toward the expected Japanese position. When they arrived, nothing was there. Fuel was running dangerously low. Most commanders would have turned back. McCluskey chose otherwise. Following his instincts, he altered course and continued searching. It was one of the most important decisions of the war. Moments later, he spotted the wake of a Japanese destroyer rushing to rejoin the fleet. Following it led him directly to Nagumo's carriers. At approximately 10:22 a.m., American dive bombers burst from the clouds. The Japanese carriers were completely exposed. Bombs plunged downward. Kaga was hit repeatedly. Explosions erupted across the flight deck. Fuel and ammunition ignited instantly. Within moments, the carrier became an inferno. Nearby, Yorktown's dive bombers descended upon Soryu. Multiple direct hits detonated munitions deep inside the ship. Flames engulfed the carrier from bow to stern. Then came Akagi. Nagumo's flagship was struck while aircraft crowded her decks. Massive explosions followed. One sailor later described the scene as a burning hell. In less than 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 fleet carriers had been fatally wounded. The entire battle had been transformed. Nagumo abandoned the burning Akagi and transferred his command to the cruiser Nagara. Only one carrier remained operational. Hiryu. Determined to continue fighting, Hiryu launched a counterattack. Japanese dive bombers found Yorktown and struck her with devastating accuracy. Fires erupted across the American carrier. Yet the crew worked miracles. Within a short period, damage control teams restored operations. Believing Yorktown had survived, the Japanese launched a second strike. This time, torpedoes slammed into the carrier's side. The damage was catastrophic. Yorktown developed a severe list. Captain Elliot Buckmaster eventually ordered the crew to abandon ship. Although salvage efforts would continue, Yorktown's fate had effectively been sealed. Now it was America's turn. Admiral Spruance ordered every available dive bomber into the air. 40 Dauntless bombers from Enterprise and Hornet raced toward Hiryu. Late in the afternoon, they found their target. The attack was devastating. Bombs smashed into Hiryu's flight deck and hangars. Fires spread uncontrollably. The final Japanese carrier was doomed. With Hiryu's destruction, the outcome of the battle was decided. Over the next 2 days, smaller clashes continued across the Pacific. But the major fighting was over. The United States had won. The cost was severe. Japan lost approximately 2,500 servicemen, nearly 300 aircraft, a heavy cruiser, and most importantly, for fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The United States lost Yorktown, the destroyer Hammond, roughly 145 aircraft, and around 370 servicemen. Yet Midway's significance extended far beyond casualties and ships. Japan's offensive momentum had been shattered. The Empire would never again launch a major strategic offensive of similar scale. From that moment forward, Japan increasingly fought a defensive war. For the United States, Midway was a turning point. The victory validated the power of intelligence, codebreaking, and careful planning. It demonstrated that the seemingly unstoppable Japanese Navy could be defeated. Perhaps most importantly, it transformed morale. Only 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Americans finally had proof that victory was possible. The tide of the Pacific War had turned. And from the waters surrounding a tiny coral atoll called Midway, the road to ultimate Allied victory had begun. The Japanese could be defeated. And the Americans had just shown the world exactly how.